everybody. This is Leticia coming to you this Thursday afternoon for another edition of my weekly Money Matters webinars. And as announced a bit earlier today, today's topic is one that's real estate related. And we're going to be talking about the popular real estate investing strategy, which is buy, renovate, rent, refinance. And we're being joined today by my amigo and investor realtor extraordinaire, Mr. Georges El Masri. Welcome, George.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for joining us today, George. George is the mastermind behind the website WellOff.ca, and he also hosts a popular real estate related podcast, also known, also called, was it the WellOff podcast, George?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, wonderful. And George, again, I only recently had a chance to announce this. I know some people will be watching this after the fact, and we're gonna, feel free to also spread this to your social network. So I appreciate very much that you you're willing to join us today, George, to share some of your experience and expertise with this popular real estate investing strategy. Thanks again for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, wonderful. I recognize some powerful figures in the background there. Who's the person on your left there? On your wall, I couldn't help noticing.
Yeah, on my left is Steve Jobs, and then on the right is Kobe Bryant.
Oh, Kobe! Oh my goodness, that's right. Well, I didn't plan to start. Like, was he one of your heroes, if I may ask?
Yeah, when I was growing up, I was a big fan of Kobe's. I don't know, I guess just being a kid, I used to always stay up, watch him play. He was an inspiration to me, and yeah, I decided to put him up there.
Oh, I think he was an inspiration to so many people.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. I'm not going to even ask about Steve Jobs because, of course, he's also such an inspiration to so many people. Mm-hmm. So, George, first of all, I want, just in the interest of properly introducing you to my audience, in case any of my audience don't know who you are, I had a pleasure of meeting you a number of years ago through the Ontario real estate investing community. Yeah, it's been a little while, yeah. And what I can tell you guys about George, he's somebody who, first of all, is very involved in the Ontario real estate investing community, and he's always been somebody very helpful. He how we actually connected is because you started a meetup about multi-unit real estate investing, mm-hmm. and you ran that for a while, and I found that very valuable. Met some great people through your meetup, and then you got busy. You're now running your podcast series, and in addition to that, you have done your own investing. So maybe you could kind of tell our audience how you even got connected to the world of real estate investing. And obviously, last but not least, you are an investor realtor. So you also help other investors get started, and you have a number of markets that you work in the Ontario region. And maybe we can talk about that as well. So I guess my first question is, how did you even start your real estate investing journey, and how did you get to where you are right now? Because you're definitely somebody that's popular on the Ontario real estate investing scene, and I know you help a lot of people.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off by telling my story from when I was just coming out of university. I worked for a tech company originally. I had a full-time job where I was doing quality assurance. So I was copying and pasting from a PDF all day pretty much. And yeah, I obviously didn't enjoy that. It wasn't for me. I actually got fired from that job. And I got fired because they thought, okay, we've seen you. We know you're passionate about certain things, but you're obviously not passionate about this. And although I was a little bit disappointed to be fired, I was actually really relieved knowing that I could pursue something that I would enjoy doing every day. And that's what I started thinking about. I started thinking, what can I do every day? Wake up every morning and be happy to work rather than be disappointed and unhappy. And that's where real estate came to mind. And I always thought I want to be an investor. But I did start off by selling real estate and focusing on that. So in 2017, I started reaching out to other investors in hopes of connecting with some people so that I could start investing myself. And one of my colleagues, Sandy McKay, who you probably know,
Another popular figure in the Ontario real estate investing space. Yes.
Yeah. He was kind enough to sit down with me, have coffee, and share with me the BRRR strategy, the buy, renovate, rent, refinance strategy. That was my first introduction to that. And it just made so much sense. And so I bought my first place soon after that meeting, renovated it myself, and then refinanced it and was able to pull out $80,000 after doing that. So
that's a great start for your first deal, George. That's awesome.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't know very much at the time. I entered the Hamilton market and I didn't really know it very well, but I knew enough to make it work. So that was the start. And then from there, I did it again with another property, and then I got into a multi-unit. And then, I've been applying that strategy, and it works really well.
Amazing. So for those of us, and I know in my audience we have people who are already experienced real estate investors, but there may also be people who are new to the space. So for the sake of the new people, would you mind describing, what this strategy really involves?
Yeah. I think the most important thing is, well, there's a couple of factors, but really finding a good deal where there is room to improve the property. That's very important. If you're buying a property that's already renovated, there isn't a lot of room to improve it, and therefore you can't really drive up the price to refinance it. So that's for, I guess, for beginners. Yeah, find yourself a good deal property that needs work. And then the next part is having your team. So having contractors in place that can go in there, fix it up. Or if you want to be like me on my first project, I actually did the work myself.
Do you really mean like you physically did the work yourself? Did you start painting? What did you do?
I did everything. Oh. I did flooring. I installed kitchen cabinets. I painted the place. I even parged the foundation. I did everything possible. Yeah.
What did you do? Parge? What is that? Sorry. Parge the foundation.
It's like basically putting a thin layer of concrete. Well, like it's parging mix, but essentially it's kind of like concrete over the foundation. And my hope was that there would no longer be water going into the basement by doing so. So it helped, but it's definitely not the perfect way to do it. But yeah.
Okay, got it. So in other words, so let's kind of back up a bit. So you said you buy a property that needs some work. So you don't buy a property that's already done up. You buy a property that needs some work.
Yeah.
And then what do you do then? You renovate it, right?
Yep.
Okay, and then
get some good tenants.
Okay, so you put a tenant in the property. Okay.
Yep. And then you go to the bank. Obviously we're kind of like just giving a brief description here, but yeah, you go to the bank. I would recommend having an appraisal package. So I'm not going to break down all the details of it, but this appraisal package includes information like the renovations you've done. It includes recent sales in the area for comparable homes. Any information that's valuable to an appraiser, you share that with them. And then you hope to get the appraisal value that you want, right? Obviously, it's an educated guess. And the banks are typically a little bit conservative, but when they give you the price or the value that you want, you're able to withdraw some capital that way.
Got it. So, exactly. So because you bought a property obviously for a lower price, now you've got what's called the after repair value of the property.
Yeah.
And based on that, the banks will allow you to the banks now see the property as being worth more. The market value of the property has gone up because of the renovations that you've done, and you'll be allowed to pull out some equity. Now, typically, I know, at least in Ontario, I don't know if the rules have changed, but you used to have to leave at least 20% equity in the property.
Yes.
Is that still the case, George, or are they being more strict these days in these Corona times?
No, it's still the same, but again, it's a case-by-case basis. So if you have low income, they may not give you 80%. They may give you less. So that could happen. Right.
So as we may have discussed on previous not podcasts, but rather webinars, when it comes to the financing of residential real estate, your profile as the buyer, the property owner comes into effect. So things like your credit score, how much income you make, are you able, so even though they recognize that this is an investment property, they still look at your profile as the owner of that property when you're going to refinance. So I'm just wondering, George, because I mean, now you're saying you're now moving into the multi-unit space. Was that one of the considerations? I mean, not that you personally, what have you, but I mean, obviously there's a limit to how many residential properties the bank will allow somebody to carry, refinance. They tend to tighten the belt after a while. Some lenders more than others. So maybe we talk. I don't want to kind of put words in your mouth, but I'm wondering, how did you end up now making the transition into the multi-unit space, and how's that going, or how did that even happen, if I may ask?
Yeah, so the first one, the first multi that I bought, I was actually still in a position to qualify for the mortgage myself because I actually got it for a really good price. Yeah, so I was able to purchase that one and use my HELOC, my home equity line of credit, on another property to put the down payment. And at the time, I actually also used a bit of my unsecured line of credit for the down payment.
Hey.
So yeah, they had to make an exception for that, but I was able to qualify. This was a 5-unit building, and I was actually able to get a residential mortgage through RBC.
Yeah.
So that was that was how I got the first one. The second one was actually with a partner. So I didn't actually put me and my wife, we bought that one with a partner. And so there's always ways to do it. You don't necessarily have to qualify for every mortgage. There's other ways. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I actually wasn't aware that you had, since I guess the last time we spoke, you had just acquired your first multi-unit, and now it sounds like you got into another deal. And so my question is, is your plan to also apply the BRRR, buy, renovate, rent, refinance strategy, but now on these multiplexes?
Absolutely, yeah. So that 5-plex that I bought last year, I purchased it for $445,000. I've since put about $70,000 into it.
Okay.
And today it's worth between $750,000 to $800,000.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
that is amazing.
Yeah, I just want to say that was not intentional. Like, I didn't expect it to go up that much, and that's not necessarily normal. I think the market has appreciated a lot, especially in Welland, where this property is. So
wow.
I have to say the market helped, but yes, I definitely bought it for a good price at the time.
Okay, yeah. So Welland, Ontario is, I guess, a small satellite city to Toronto. How long of a drive is it? Close to Niagara Falls?
Yeah, it's not far from Niagara Falls. It's probably an hour and a half away from Toronto, maybe a little bit more, but yeah.
That's amazing. And yeah, and I know you started off in the Hamilton area, but I guess what's been happening in recent years, property prices in the Hamilton area have just kept going up and up, and so people are looking for better deals, I guess, a little bit further away from the greater Toronto area, Hamilton. So that brings me to my next question, George. Where do you see some opportunities right now if people are looking to implement this strategy, whether with a traditional residential property or perhaps a small multi-unit? Where do you see things? Where do you still see opportunities? Like, are there still any buying opportunities, especially now that the market in that area seems to have just gone through the roof, it seems?
Yeah, there are absolutely opportunities. There are always opportunities. It's just a matter of sometimes becoming creative. So, I mean, which cities? There are opportunities in every city. There are opportunities in Toronto for the right people. But personally, I like to work in Hamilton, Welland, and St. Catharines. And I can say I have clients of mine that are buying multis right now in Hamilton. And what we're doing, I can kind of share with you the strategy.
Sure.
These are typically duplexes, large duplexes over 2,000 square feet. And what we do is we find homes that have the ability to be converted potentially to 4 units. Either 3 or 4 units, but usually 4.
Okay.
So you buy these legal duplexes and you add 2 additional units. Typically, it would be 1 unit in the basement and then maybe 1 in the loft because they're 2.5-story properties.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so usually the purchase price of these homes are in the low 700s or sometimes in the high 6s.
Okay.
And they require, let's say, maybe 120, sometimes a little bit more, thousand. And the refinances are after repair values coming in at about 1.1 to 1.2 million typically.
Wow.
Somewhere in
Okay.
that range.
Wow.
Yeah, so obviously you can see that doing that, you're able to withdraw usually all of your capital. Sometimes you might have a little bit left. And I can say that some investors are more comfortable with this because technically sometimes these units aren't legal. Like it's not a legal fourplex sometimes,
Yeah.
but if you're comfortable with that, then that's a strategy that can work well. If you want legal units, then you got to pay a little bit more for that. But it's just an idea. It's just an idea that
You got to
I
pay
see.
a bit. Amazing. Sorry for interrupting. So you got to pay a bit more in terms of like the permits that you have to convert the property to a legal fourplex permits. And I don't know if are there development fees in Hamilton, if I may ask? Because I know in Toronto to put it like multiple units in a property, it's going to cost you.
Yeah, I'm not sure necessarily if there are development fees, but yeah, obviously there are a lot of fees associated with the conversion. But yeah, I mean, you could find a legal non-conforming sometimes, even a legal non-conforming triplex. But again, usually those have a higher price tag.
Okay, I see. So the moment of, because, and for people that are listening in who may not know what the difference is, there are properties in these cities that are being used as a duplex, as a triplex, as a fourplex, but those units were never recognized as by the city as a legal unit. So if you want the stamp of approval, but meanwhile they're oftentimes up to the standards, up to the code, up to fire code. Like they're livable units. There's nothing wrong with them. They just don't have the stamp of approval from, in this case, the municipality to say, yes, this is a legal, it's recognized by the city as a 4-unit dwelling, for example. And so then that's very interesting. So that's a very interesting. So in other words, adding units to a property. Now, do you have to make sure that the zoning allows for, especially if you're going to be pursuing legal status for this triplex or fourplex, do you usually check to see if the zoning even allows for that, before, is that something that you recommend that people check, like, hey, what does zoning allow for in this area?
Yeah, of course. It's always important to have as much knowledge as possible. You want to check the zoning before buying, but some investors will understand that they may not be permitted to have 4 units, but it's a risk they're willing to take. Again, they will make any adjustments for the units to be up to code, like you said, to meet fire code and to meet all of that. So technically, they're doing all the things that are required of them, but it's just the zoning isn't necessarily permitting that use.
Got it. And it's up to the individual buyer, if they feel comfortable. The bottom line, once something is built, I don't know if with Hamilton, I know some municipalities sort of like grandfather in the units.
Yeah.
So they're not going to be like, oh no, you got to tear it down now. As long as the units are according to fire code, you're not breaking any laws in that regard. Is grandfathering something that they do in Hamilton, as far as you know, George?
Okay, so the grandfathering thing is the legal non-conforming status.
Yeah.
So that basically means that at one point, the property met all the requirements to be a legal, let's say, fourplex or triplex. And according to the current rules and regulations, it no longer conforms to today's standards. But as long as it's been operating as a triplex or fourplex or whatever the case is, then it can continue to operate that way. But if for some reason somebody turns a triplex into a single family home, then that will now become the new standard for the zoning, right?
So don't do that, guys.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the whole idea is with multiple units, you have a higher cash flow potential, right? And also potentially higher property value. So yeah,
and I just want to say, I'm not suggesting doing this. I'm just sharing with you what I've seen from different people.
Yeah.
Of course, it's better to go down the legal zoning method, like to go with that. But again, to each their own. Some investors are comfortable with it, some aren't. And who am I to judge?
Yeah, I totally understand. Perfectly cool. So I guess in terms, and I know, George, you're obviously not the only person applying this strategy. I know it's actually one of the surest strategies in terms of wealth building, and you and I both know other investors who have applied this strategy successfully. So I guess my question would be, what are some of the potential pitfalls with this strategy? I can think of some, but I'm just curious, from your experience and that of other investors that some of your clients, are there certain mistakes that perhaps a novice investor could potentially make, and how could those be avoided?
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things that can get in the way is potentially assuming tenants.
Okay.
Let's say you have a property that has 4 tenants in it, and you're assuming them, and your plan is to renovate this building. Well, that can take you several years, because it's very hard to remove tenants from a property once they're established. So, again, a lot of investors that I work with, they want vacant possession, and that's something that we can typically negotiate when we're purchasing the property, and that allows you to go in there, renovate, and refinance very quickly. So your money turns over very quickly, as opposed to buying a property and slowly renovating as the tenants leave. That can take 5+ years potentially.
Got it. Now, are you finding, yeah, I hear you, because I know at least in Ontario, we have pretty strong tenant protection laws, and it's not as easy to especially if we're talking about buying a small multi-unit, you don't have the excuse that, oh, I'm moving into the unit. You might be moving into one of the units, but you've got 3 other units to turn over potentially. And if they are stuck on the rent control, of course, they probably are not wanting to move unless they have other reasons for moving. So thanks for sharing that. Now, are you finding that, because it sounds like the market in these areas has been pretty hot, are you finding that property owners are willing to even promise vacant possession, or is this something that you have to be a little more aggressive in terms of the offer, or rather more generous in terms of what you're offering to entice them to give you that?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the properties we're going after, the sellers are usually open to providing vacant possession, either because they already have, well, like I said, they're sometimes legal duplexes, so there's only 2 units. And sometimes we have a unit that's vacant already, and they might have a good relationship with the other tenant and say, hey, I'm selling. Are you guys willing to leave by this date? And if they are, then problem solved. Another thing we've done is sometimes we put a clause in the agreement that if the owner can't provide vacant possession by the closing date, then the buyer will have the right to extend closing by an additional 60 days to allow for more time for that to happen.
Okay, it's that important to get that vacant possession. It's that important. You'd rather extend the closing date than take over an existing tenant that you don't know their paying history, and if your idea from the beginning is to implement the BRRR strategy, then of course the existing tenants unfortunately would get in the way potentially. So thanks for that tip. Any other things you can think of, George? I mean, I can think of one right now, but I'm wondering if that's something like anything else that comes to mind, and then I can just ask you about something else that comes to my mind.
And what do you mean by anything?
Well, any other potential issues that especially a novice investor should watch out for if they're trying to implement this strategy?
When you say this strategy, are you referring to the BRRRR strategy specifically?
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of things. I mean, overpaying for a property, overestimating the after repair value, underestimating renovations. Those are all things. Or even sometimes like just wanting to do things that spending a little bit more and doing really nice things when that just drives up your renovation costs, and it doesn't allow you to recuperate your money. So those are all things that can happen when you're trying to apply the strategy.
That's actually what you already mentioned. One of the things that came to mind, which is overspending for renovations. Even people who are thinking to do the flipping strategy, because I've had other guests on my show who that was their choice strategy in their real estate investing journey. But I know overspending for renovations is definitely a big mistake, and it can be a newbie mistake. So I think you, as an experienced realtor, you can advise your clients, hey, if you're buying in this area, don't this is how much you can estimate, your after repair value to be. Don't think that by spending extra and having these luxury touches is necessarily going to allow you to recoup that investment, because this is how much this area can support, right? Although I know that's kind of fluid right now with the way the market in that area seems to have been. So again, we spoke about some of the areas. So you said you like the Hamilton area, you like St. Catharines. Now I know St. Catharines used to be primarily a university town. Is that still the case? What's going on right now in that area, George? Like St. Catharines, Niagara. I'm not saying Niagara used to be a university town, but I mean there were previously a lot of investors that were investing in student rentals in St. Catharines. Do you see that shifting now with the current restrictions, the school having gone online? What's been your experience with that in this past year?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I was never into student rentals. I've never worked on one. I never represented a client on one. That's not really my thing. So I can't really speak to that. But I can say that, like I've mentioned to you earlier, I've seen prices in Welland and St. Catharines and those areas increase substantially in the last couple of years, like huge increases.
So crazy.
Yeah, and like there's good tenants out there. You can find young professionals with great jobs, good solid income, good credit, all of that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of potential. Yeah, there are some colleges and universities there, like Brock University, Niagara College, that type of thing. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, I think a lot of people are starting to go out that way because they're just being priced out of the market. So those are some of the cities that they're forced to go to if they want to become homeowners.
And that's interesting, George, which has been putting pressure, like upwards pressure on the prices in those areas. And you know what, this past year with the whole COVID situation, I think it's actually that's contributing to this trend, because initially we had like the very hot GTA the Toronto real estate market, and it was hot for both like in terms of selling prices, but also rentals. Like there was just like nowhere to go. But now all these professionals are increasingly able to work online, and so they're probably thinking, well, I could live in a Toronto condo, or I could maybe get better bang for my buck, in one of these satellite cities, and have a backyard, and my dog can roam free. Like, do you think, am I being accurate in what I'm saying? Like, do you think that the current crisis is actually helping to actually elevate even more the property values in these satellite markets?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. People have been going away, working from home. A lot of people now are on a permanent working from home status. So I don't see why they would be paying huge rent or huge mortgages, have huge mortgage payments if they're able to live a similar life somewhere further from the city. Unless, I mean, you can't even go to restaurants. You can't, like, there's no entertainment, right? Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I've been very outspoken and like not a fan of what's been going on in the great city of Toronto and other, large Canadian cities, where, it seems to me that so many of the benefits that city living used to offer are like they've at least for the time being eliminated. So like, I might as well have a larger, beautiful living space. And so whether you're a potential tenant or a potential buyer or a potential investor, like all these reasons, like it just makes sense right now to be going to some of these smaller cities. And to the good fortune of people who already own properties in those cities, because you've benefited from this, like, wave of I'm thinking of the Spanish word, so we're just gonna leave it at that. But you know what I mean, like elevation in the market. The word doesn't come to mind right now. Okay, George. Well, it's all very interesting. So I'm just trying to think. So if let's say somebody has been wanting to get involved in real estate investing, and they understand, like, what, this is a property that offers me. This is an investing strategy that offers me sort of the best of both worlds. I get to keep my property, And at the same time, by refinancing, I'm able to now pull out some equity, which would potentially allow me to acquire my next deal, my next property. So as opposed to, for example, flipping, where once you flip the property, you no longer have that property. Yes, you've taken in your profits. You typically have to pay some tax on those profits, right? And then sure, you can go ahead, move on to your next deal, but you've lost the goose that lays the golden eggs. You've lost your first property, which would otherwise potentially still be paying you. You've got your tenants paying you rent and so on. So that's one benefit I see with the BRRRR strategy versus just flipping, right? So let's say somebody sees this benefit and they want to get started. Like, what would you say? What would there be their starting point? What would you recommend? Let's say they came to you and was like, George, I'm interested. What should I do? Like, where do I start?
Yeah, I mean, I would start off by looking at my current properties, if assuming I'm this person that you're talking about. If
Yeah.
you own any properties, even your primary residence, look to see if you have some equity in there, which is very likely if you bought over to a year or two ago, and try to extract that equity from your property so that you could invest it. And in doing so, again, if you apply this BRRRR strategy, you're investing it, but then you're likely getting most of it back, if not all of it, potentially, when you refinance again. So yeah, it's important to get started that way, and then reach out to someone like me who has access to deals, access to contractors, has a full team in place to make this happen, and you get going from there.
Amazing. And if you're curious, let's say you're somebody who already owns your principal residence and you've been thinking of getting started with real estate investing. Again, George is just an example of the magic of this strategy. But I have met other investors who have also been, equally successful, and it really seems to be kind of like one of the best strategies for creating wealth with real estate. I guess the first step would be talking to a mortgage broker to figure out, hey, can I even access some of this equity, right, George? And
Yep.
and you and I both have amazing mortgage brokers that we work with that will work with you, whether you're a professional, whether you're self-employed, business owner, whatever your situation may be. Trust that there is a solution for you in terms of, again, to the extent that you have, if you have a property already where you may be able to access some of that equity. Even if you don't own a property, I guess that would be your first starting point. Like, talk to a mortgage broker. George or myself can definitely refer you to someone. And then your next step would be, once you know what your options are, once you know what you're able to acquire, work with someone like George to figure out, hey, what kind of property do I even want to purchase? Is it going to be, do I have enough to buy a duplex? Do I have enough to buy a triplex? And then the amazing thing about someone like George is, like, he's already been through you've been in the trenches, from starting off, renovating your first property by yourself, which is like, it just blows my mind that you would do that, to now having a trustworthy team in place where, you're definitely not having to do the work yourself, but at least you can trust these people to do a good job. Because unfortunately, guys, I've heard one too many stories of contractors that, like, fly-by-night operations. So if you're not in a position to do your work yourself, you definitely want to work with a trustworthy contractor that will say what they do. They're gonna do what they say they're gonna do, and do the work to the standard that can result in a good, after repair value for your property, right, George?
Exactly. Yeah, you covered it all there.
Well, just about, but like, man, I gotta say, speaking of pitfalls, people trying to do it themselves. And I'm not just saying, like, hey, if you have the skills, if you're already a general contractor, you've got what it takes to do the work yourself, amazing. But I know that's not the situation for a lot of people. So having those trustworthy team members is so important. I mean, I've heard too many stories. So it's good to know that you have teams in these areas, George. So you know what? I think we covered quite a bit. I don't want to overwhelm people. Anything else you want to share about this strategy, or anything else, any other opportunities that you're seeing in the current market? Like, I guess, what advice would you have for somebody that's wanting to get started, or other than what we already discussed? Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, opportunities come and go very quickly. So if somebody's interested, just reach out to me and I'll share with you what's available at the time. but yeah, like if you don't buy something now within a week, it's pretty much gone. Even sometimes, like we often go for off market stuff. So yeah, you got to move really fast.
Wow. Yeah. People, it's amazing to me that like despite the current, I guess political, economic situation, people are like, you know what, the smart people are still out there looking for deals. They're not stopping, and that makes me very happy. People are like, no, I'm gonna make my money. I'm gonna get in. I'm gonna be proactive about my wealth creation. I'm not gonna just sit and wait and see what happens, right?
Oh yeah.
So I love that. So what's the best way for people to reach out to you, George? Maybe we could put your contact info in the comments.
Yeah, best way is just to go to WellOff.ca, and
Mm-hmm.
you can actually book a call with me there if you'd like. My contact information's there as well. But yeah, I
Amazing.
could do a 15-minute call. Just go to the website and book it there directly.
Amazing. Amazing. Wonderful. Thank you so much, George, for joining us today and sharing some of your journey with us, sharing some of the tips, some of your learning experiences. Again, I've known you for a number of years, and I know how dedicated you are, and I just know you're an overall good guy. And you come from a good place. You really want to help people, and I'm definitely grateful to have you in my network, have you as somebody that I can count on, and I know that whoever reaches out to you, you're going to take good care of them. So thanks again for joining us, and thanks again everyone for joining us. And absolutely, you're welcome. Feel free to reach out to George if you have any questions about this strategy, or if it's something that you're wanting to explore. Okay.
Thank you, Leticia. It's really nice touching.
My pleasure. My pleasure. All the best, George. Look forward to staying in touch and supporting each other in any ways we can. Okay. All the best.
Take care.
Thanks again. Cheers.